Dark Souls 3 is the latest entry in the beloved Souls franchise, one that From Software has kept running without missing a beat since 2011. Or have they? Can Dark Souls 3 live up to the high standards the series has been known for without being a letdown to someone like Dark Souls 2? Dark Souls 3 is as epic and difficult as anyone hoped for. From the various locations, traps, enemy placement to the enemy themselves, everything here is created to kill you and make you despair as you die again and again. The creatures are all terrifying and nightmarish, and if you're not careful enough, some of them can combo you to death. Speaking about combat, this is one aspect that made me a bit worried. I thought that the passage from the slow, defensive style of the first two Dark Souls to the faster, more aggressive style of Bloodborne wouldn't be very easy to do. Fortunately, I was wrong, and combat in Dark Souls 3 is very fluid and satisfying, even though some players like myself will need a bit of practice. For anyone that wants a game with a nice, easy to understand story, go elsewhere. The whole Souls series is about finding clues, paying close attention to dialogues and descriptions, and figuring out what the hell is going on. I will try to tell a bit of backstory from what I've gathered so far, so some events won't be so confusing. Before the events of any game, there was an age of ancient dragons that lacked a soul and therefore were immortal. Below this world, in the underground, the first flame was ignited and was divided into three souls. The beings that had taken those three pieces arose from the death and challenged the ancient dragons, defeating them with the help of a traitor, Steve the Scaleless. These three lords were Lord Gwyn, Grave Lord Nito, and the Witch of Italit. And thus the Age of Fire begins. But something unexpected happened, something unknown by the other three lords. There was a fourth soul, the Dark Soul, discovered by the furtive pygmy. Meanwhile, Lord Gwyn was elected ruler of the newfound kingdom, Lordran, and divided his soul into an army to protect his flame. Nito became obsessed with death, and the witch invaded fire-based magic and built a temple to protect her flame. The furtive pygmy, in the meanwhile, forgotten by everybody, was picked by Koth, one of the serpents that lived in the Age of Dragons, to create the Abyss, and let the Dark Soul multiply without losing its power, and thus the human race was born. In the end, though, not all can last. Lord Gwyn knows that if the first flame dies out, the Age of Man and Darkness will begin, so he tries to replicate the first flame and with the soul he found within it. In the end, he sacrifices himself to keep the flame ignited, thus preventing the Age of Darkness. Gwyn, by sacrificing himself to the flame, became a Lord of Cinder, ashen, dead, but still powerful. Now, after a long story made short, and the whole events of the first two Dark Souls omitted, Dark Souls 3 begins. It's set in Lothric, a land where all the lands of the Lords of Cinder converge, and an unspecified amount of time after Dark Souls 2. Evidently, Gwyn was not the only one to try offering himself to the flame, and it didn't exactly work out well for the other lords either. You, as an unkindled one, have to hunt down these big bad bosses to return them to their thrones. The basic structure of the Souls series is still here, but there is one notable change. Here, there is no concept of humanity. Instead, there are embers. They work like human effigies, but thematically they are different. Everything in Lothric is on the verge of darkness, destruction, and despair, more than the other games. Here, humanity is already lost. All that's left are ash and embers. One of the main problems Dark Souls 2 had was that most of its locations weren't interconnected at all like the first Dark Souls. In fact, many were skeptical if Dark Souls 3 would have this problem. I found an image on the internet that perfectly explains this situation. Dark Souls 1 is very connected, the second game is very linear, while the third one has a lot of branching paths, but still being a bit linear. This is reflected on the game maps. They are very huge and expansive and have lots of secret areas and bosses. But to advance to the next zones, there's still only one route to go. The different zones are less varied than Dark Souls 2, but still manage to feel very diverse from one another. The enemies, however, suffer from a little problem from the previous game. A lot of the creatures are humanoid, and they're all undead and have a different weapon and moveset. I have noticed that there are a lot of more tougher enemies this time around that are marked as common enemies instead of mini-bosses, for example. However, the real bosses, on the other hand, are always fantastic, really challenging, epic, sometimes huge, as they have always been. Since Dark Souls 3 is the last chapter in the epic Souls saga, some elements from the previous games were borrowed. One welcome addition was the possibility to travel between bonfires from the start of the game, and, like Majula, there is a central hub where you level up, reinforce and repair weapons, and where NPCs go, called Firing Shrine. Talking about NPCs, many return from the previous game, and it's a thing that really disappoints me, because if you haven't played, especially Dark Souls 1, some of them feel really out of place. I get that this is supposed to be a farewell game, but sometimes it relies on nostalgia from the first game. Another returning element is the Covenants. There are the usual ones like the Warriors of Sunlight and the Blue Sentinels, but there are also new additions that manage to shake up the PvP and co-op formula quite a bit. Another obvious feature that makes a comeback is online functionality that has never been better. PvP has almost no lag and matchmaking is very proficient, as invaders are matched with players of their level and have similar weapons. Co-op has never been easier, as you and a friend can set up the same password so you can summon each other regardless of your level. This is perfect for anyone who has difficulty in some areas or you just want to have a co-op run of the game. Dark Souls 3 can be enjoyed well if it isn't graphically appealing. Now, I'm not saying that graphics matter almost everything, but it won't hurt a game if next to a stellar gameplay you have on-par graphics. This game uses the same engine as Bloodborne does, and manages to fix the huge loading times the game had. Unfortunately, there are still some frame rate dips, but nothing too drastical. Environment and textures are very detailed, and I love how so much detail there is in the houses, towns, and even enemies. This is one of the most beautiful games in this year's current generation consoles. Every area has a distinct style to them, even though a lot of design choices have clearly taken inspiration from Bloodborne's distinct style. Dark Souls 3 is a great farewell to this beloved trilogy, a grand summer of what was made during these 5 years, and I think it earns a 9 out of 10. This is definitely a game worth checking out if you already like the other games in the series, or want a really challenging game to pour your heart and time into, or just want to get into this great and distorted world. And now, excuse me while I try to kill this huge Balrog.